This is TWiT.
The reason I say generational norms is you're talking about the shift to, say, video conferencing. But if you look at people under 30, they have been sending each other Snapchats and communicating via images for nearly a decade at this point. And so for them, going to video conferencing is a logical next step. And they're the same people who have been driving the idea of the fluid workspace that we discussed earlier, because these are kids who went through an entire school system using Google Docs and Google Tools, where they grew up with a model that all of their work would be reviewed by other people as they were doing it. It would be, and it was a really collaborative, iterative model of work. And there have been people who study the workplace who have talked about there are real generational shifts in how folks who went into the workplace in the 70s, 80s, and 90s regard task flow compared to people who have come in, having come up on say, the Google Docs model. And I think we're going to see the same thing when it comes to teleworking and having Zoom fatigue and things like that. Because if you've had a method of work that's primarily self-contained and you've got these very structured communications that are either face-to-face or on the phone, you're probably not going to be used to the always-on, visually stimulating modes like Zoom calls or image chats and things like that. Whereas for kids who have grown up with this is their normal.
We're going to have the Snap workplace, aren't we?
I have a kind of a different take on that, which is that I think that a lot of these kids are very able to be like 3 different versions of themselves at the same time. So there's the version that you're putting on Snapchat, and then there's the version on Discord, which is mostly voice. And you're doing those things concurrently, and they're very, very able to show only part of themselves, and it's the part that they choose. And I actually think that the resistance to any sort of virtual appearance, like the stuff that Facebook and Oculus are most certainly working on, the ability to let you show up in a room with your friends, I think that the resistance to that might be if I have to show up physically, whether it's physically virtually or physically, I have to be much more aware, and it takes like cognitive load to think about how you look on camera, what your facial expressions are, whether you're responding to somebody when they're talking to you, and your body and your affect is responding. And I think that it takes more work, and that's part of the reason people get Zoom fatigue, because they're tired.
But isn't that what you do in real life, Lindsay? I mean, how is that different from
there? Because you have to spend a lot.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, yeah, I think that is what you do in real life. And that's part of the reason, like the teenagers that I live with sometimes will be like, before the pandemic, hey, why don't you go hang out with your friends? And they kind of look at you as askance and go, I am.
Yeah, our 17-year-old will have friends over, and then they'll all go home so they can play a game together. Because they can't do it in meet space.
My niece is 22. My nephews are younger. They're both teenagers, and it's been really interesting watching every family gathering. At the same time they're talking to us in person, they all have their phones open because they're Snapchatting their friends constantly at the same time too. But it's fascinating to me because it's parallel socialization in a way.
Yeah.
And Lindsay,
we used to have
there's
parallel
mode
play
switching that's going on with it.
Yeah, when kids are little, they parallel play. When they're really little, like 2-year-olds, they sit there and they're playing with each other, but they're doing different things. Now they've grown up and they're doing it in real life.